Gabriel Simeon was born into a world that seemed perfect to everyone outside. His family lived in a grand mansion, had luxury cars, and threw lavish parties filled with powerful people from high society. But behind the heavy oak doors of that mansion, everything was different. There was only coldness, anger, and endless shouting. Gabriel's father, Richard Simeon, was a ruthless businessman. In the office, he was a force to be reckoned with, and at home, he was just as unforgiving. Richard's idea of love wasn't what most people would imagine. He believed he loved Gabriel's mother, Evelyn, but it wasn't the kind of love people dream about. No, it was possessive. It was controlling. It was the kind of love that made one person feel trapped, while the other was allowed to breathe. Gabriel remembered the nights when he would hide behind the staircase, his small body trembling in fear. He would listen to the sounds of his parents fighting, his mother's voice shaking with sadness. His mother, Evelyn, had once been full of life. She had a smile that could light up a room, but over the years, she became quieter. The sparkle in her eyes slowly faded. Whenever she did smile, it never quite reached her eyes. When she was silent, the house seemed to freeze. Gabriel had witnessed something that would stay with him forever when he was just 8 years old. His mother tried to leave. She had whispered to Gabriel, promising him a new life far away from the prison they lived in, a life where they wouldn't be controlled by his father. But before they could escape, Richard found out. Gabriel would never forget that night. His mother had fallen to her knees, tears spilling onto the cold marble floor. Richard stood over her, his voice calm but full of danger. "Did you really think you could leave me, Evelyn?" he had asked. From that moment on, Gabriel knew that love wasn't something beautiful like in fairy tales. Love, he realized, was a cage. And once you were trapped inside, you could never escape. As Gabriel grew up, these bitter lessons were burned into his mind. He swore he would never love anyone. He swore he would never have children. He didn't want to make the same mistakes as his parents. He didn't want to control someone or be controlled. And he certainly didn't want his child to grow up like he did, in a house full of fear and anger. With sharp intelligence and a ruthless determination, Gabriel built his own empire. He became one of the youngest billionaires in the world. Simeon Financial Group, the company he led, was unstoppable. He was feared by rivals and admired by his employees. But despite all his wealth and power, Gabriel remained distant. He had no friends, no interest in socializing, and he kept everyone at arm's length. People knew him as the perfect CEO, a man with no emotion. Women saw him as nothing more than a wealthy, cold man. Gabriel thought he could live like this forever, keeping his heart locked away. That was, until he met Amelia. Olivia Jordan had never imagined that she would cross paths with someone like Gabriel Simeon. She was the kind of person who valued warmth and real connection, something Gabriel seemed to lack. Olivia was an event planner, one of the best in New York. She had organized some of the biggest events for the city's elite, from politicians to movie stars, and even billionaires like Gabriel Simeon. When Olivia was tasked with organizing a charity gala for Simeon Financial Group, she had heard of Gabriel. He was a mystery to most, a man who kept his personal life private and never made headlines for romantic scandals. He was known for being cold and distant. So, when Olivia finally met him, she wasn't shocked by his aloofness. He stood in the middle of the bustling party, yet he seemed to be miles away from everyone. No one dared approach him unless it was necessary. But Olivia wasn't intimidated. She treated him like any other guest, with professionalism and ease. "Mr. Simeon, I hope you're satisfied with tonight's event," Olivia said, her voice steady as she approached him. Gabriel turned to her, his eyes briefly meeting hers. "I have no complaints," he replied, his words cold but with a small nod of acknowledgement. For Gabriel, that was about as close to praise as he ever got. Olivia smiled. "Then I'm relieved." She didn't try to impress him or pry into his life. She spoke to him simply, as if they were old friends. That, more than anything, caught Gabriel off guard. The night went on, and while most people would have left the after-party, Gabriel remained. He stayed by the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. He rarely drank, but something felt different tonight. Maybe it was Amelia. She found her way to his side, ordering a glass of wine. "It's been a long day, hasn't it?" Olivia remarked, trying to lighten the mood. Gabriel glanced at her, and for the first time that evening, a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You don't have to call me Mr. Simeon. Gabriel is fine." Olivia blinked in surprise but quickly responded with a smile. "All right then, Gabriel." They sat together, talking like old friends. There were no probing questions, no awkward silences. They just talked about life, about nothing important, and it felt easy. Gabriel, who had always kept a wall up between himself and others, found himself relaxing in her presence. By the end of the night, they were both tipsy, their conversations growing more relaxed. And then, before either of them could think about it too much, Gabriel leaned in. It wasn't like him to make the first move, but something about Olivia felt different. The kiss was brief, just a soft touch of lips, but in that moment, something inside Gabriel shifted. It was as if all the walls he had built around himself came crashing down. They left the party together, and for the first time in his life, Gabriel didn't care what would happen the next day. The morning light was soft as it filtered through the curtains. Gabriel woke up, his head still heavy from the night before. Olivia was beside him, still asleep, her breathing peaceful. This was unfamiliar to Gabriel. After every other night with a woman, there had always been expectations. A follow-up date, a phone call, or some form of a promise. But not with Amelia. When she woke up, she simply stretched and smiled at him. "Good morning, Gabriel," she said, with no expectations, no demands. It was freeing. There was no pressure. They continued seeing each other, enjoying simple moments together. They watched movies, shared stories about their lives, and for the first time, Gabriel experienced something real. Sometimes, on quiet nights, they would seek each other out, finding comfort in each other's warmth. But Gabriel knew that things couldn't stay this way forever. He had spent so many years building walls around his heart, never letting anyone in. He had vowed never to fall in love. But with Amelia, he felt something he didn't know how to explain. And as much as Gabriel tried to fight it, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in a way he could never have predicted. Olivia couldn't pinpoint exactly when her relationship with Gabriel had shifted into something so undefined. No promises, no titles, yet somehow they kept finding their way back to each other. They were not like any other couple. Unlike the other women who had spent the night with Gabriel, Olivia was the only one who could sit across from him the next morning, no walls between them, and not be pushed away. They shared breakfast on lazy mornings, watched movies together during quiet weekends, and spent hours chatting about nothing and everything. It was simple, natural, almost too easy. But that ease, the comfort they found in each other, also hurt Olivia in a way she couldn't explain. Gabriel, despite his cold exterior, was different with her. But that difference wasn't enough. There were still so many things between them that couldn't be ignored. Gabriel was the man everyone feared, the cold billionaire with a heart sealed off from the world. He had no real friends, no family he was close to, no one he truly let in. To everyone else, Gabriel Simeon was a sharp businessman, a ruthless leader. He was untouchable, emotionless. But with Amelia, she'd seen the glimpses of a man who, for brief moments, let his guard down, his exhaustion showing, the way his hand would reach for hers without realizing, the times he'd watch her silently in the quiet moments when neither of them spoke. Olivia loved him, despite everything. She didn't expect him to confess his feelings, didn't hope for promises of a future together. She just wanted him to understand that love didn't have to be something he ran from, something he had to push away. But Gabriel wasn't ready to see that. Olivia had always dreamed of having a family, children she could love, care for, and build a future with. The idea of raising a child in a home full of love, not fear, had always been her greatest desire. But Gabriel didn't feel the same way. One evening, while they sat on the couch, watching a movie together, Olivia brought it up. "Have you ever thought about having kids?" she asked casually, her voice soft. At the sound of the question, Gabriel's body stiffened. He didn't look at her, but she could see the change in his posture, the way his fingers tightened around his whiskey glass. After a long, tense pause, he finally spoke. "No," he said, his voice low and firm. Olivia frowned, trying to understand. "You don't like children?" Gabriel let out a sharp breath and put down his glass. "I just have no intention of having kids. Ever." His finality hit Olivia hard. She had hoped, deep down, that maybe Gabriel hadn't thought about it, that maybe he hadn't made a decision yet. But now, it was clear. He had already made up his mind, and there was no changing it. She forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Why?" Gabriel went silent for a long time, before finally speaking again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be like my father." His words broke Amelia's heart. She had heard him speak about his father before, a powerful man, wealthy, controlling, a man who kept his mother caged in a life that was far from love. Gabriel had grown up in a home where love was twisted into something suffocating, something dark. Maybe that was why he was so afraid of being a father himself. He feared becoming what he despised. Olivia understood, but that didn't stop the ache in her chest. She didn't blame Gabriel for his past, for the walls he had built around his heart, for the way he couldn't love her in the way she wished. But the truth was becoming clearer with each passing day. She loved him, but he could never give her the one thing she wanted most, a family, a child, a complete life. Every time she looked at him, she felt like she was holding onto a handful of sand. If she held on too tight, it would slip away, and if she let go, it would slip away just the same. But what was worse? Holding on forever, or walking away? Olivia didn't want to pressure him, didn't want to force him into something he wasn't ready for, but her love for him wasn't enough to fill the emptiness that lived between them. They wanted different things. Gabriel didn't believe in love. Olivia couldn't stop loving him. Olivia stared at the pregnancy test in her hands, her heart racing so fast she could almost hear it. 2 red lines. She was pregnant. She should have been terrified, this wasn't planned, and she had no one to share the news with, no partner to help her navigate this new chapter. But instead, a smile slowly spread across her face, one that was almost out of place. For as long as she could remember, Olivia had always dreamed of having a child. The thought of raising a little one, holding them close, nurturing them, was something she had yearned for. She wanted a family, a real family, full of love. Not the kind of love filled with fear, control, and invisible chains like Gabriel had known. But now, that dream was becoming a reality. She placed a hand over her abdomen, where a tiny life was beginning to grow. Just the thought of it made her heart swell with warmth. But then, her thoughts turned to Gabriel. She remembered all the times she had tried to talk to him about children. Every time, he had responded the same way. "I don't want kids. Never. I don't want to be like my father." Gabriel didn't hate children. She knew that. He wasn't cruel. But his fear of becoming like his father, his fear of turning into someone who controlled, possessed, who couldn't love freely, kept him from embracing the idea of being a father. Olivia knew what this would mean. She knew Gabriel wouldn't be happy. He would never change, not for her, not for anyone. And she couldn't bear the thought of telling him, of seeing that cold, distant look in his eyes. She couldn't force him to be a father if he wasn't ready for it. She couldn't stay with him if he could never give her what she truly wanted. No matter how much she loved him, there was no escaping the truth. She didn't want her child to grow up in coldness. She couldn't let them live without the love they deserved from their father. So, after days of struggling with her thoughts, Olivia made a decision. She couldn't keep holding on to a love that wasn't enough to give her what she needed. She had to protect her child. Olivia knew what she had to do. She had to leave. She couldn't force Gabriel to become something he wasn't, and she couldn't stay in a place where she would always be longing for more. So, she packed her things, resigned from her job, and made plans to move to a new city, far away. Somewhere where no one knew who she was, where she could start fresh. On the day she left, she stood in front of her apartment one last time, taking in the memories that filled the walls. She didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. If Gabriel wanted to find her, he would. But if he didn't, then she would know. From that moment on, it wasn't about Gabriel anymore. It was about her and her child, and that was all that mattered. Gabriel Simeon had never been one for romance. Love? It was a concept he'd long discarded, along with any ideas of lasting relationships. So, when Olivia left without a word, he didn't dwell on it much. Maybe she was just upset, caught up in a new project, or needed space. In his mind, it was only a matter of time before she'd return, just as she always had. No commitments. No labels. No promises. No love. So, when days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no sign of Amelia, something started to gnaw at him. He called her, but she didn't answer. He went to her workplace, only to find out she had resigned and left without a trace. That was when the reality hit him, she was really gone. A strange emptiness settled in his chest, one he couldn't quite explain. It was like something had been ripped away from him, but he had no idea what. Still, he carried on, burying himself in work. Numbers, deals, and meetings became his shield against the gnawing void growing inside of him. But no matter how many deals he closed, no matter how many zeros were added to his bank account, every night when the silence of his penthouse crept in, it was Amelia's face that haunted him. 5 years had passed, and yet, for Gabriel, nothing had truly changed. He was still the same cold, calculating businessman, buried in work, his emotions locked away. Yet no matter how busy he kept himself, Amelia's face was never far from his mind. Every night, her image would resurface, even as he tried to push it away. Then one day, the unexpected happened. Gabriel found himself in a small town, nowhere near his usual world of high-rise offices and boardrooms. He was there for business, of course, to acquire a promising startup his company had been eyeing. After a long meeting, his assistant suggested stopping by a little cafe on the corner. Gabriel, uninterested, agreed reluctantly. A cafe was just a cafe, after all. But the moment he stepped inside, everything changed. It was as if the world froze. His grip on the coffee cup tightened, his heart began to race. There, sitting by the window bathed in the soft afternoon sunlight, was Amelia. 5 years had passed, but she looked exactly the same. The same gentle eyes. The same warm smile. But there was something else. A little boy, about 4 years old, was sitting next to her, chatting away happily, his eyes sparkling with joy. Gabriel's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the child. That boy, he looked just like him. A rush of memories flooded Gabriel's mind, the times Olivia had mentioned wanting a family, her longing for children. He had dismissed it all, thinking it wasn't a concern of his. But now, seeing the child who looked so much like him, everything shattered. Olivia had been pregnant, and she had left to raise their child alone. His own indifference had driven her away. He had pushed her aside when she asked about having children, had coldly dismissed her words, not realizing the impact of his actions. Anger surged inside Gabriel, not at Amelia, but at himself. His own cruelty had pushed her away. And now, 5 years had passed, and he had lost all that time with his son. His fists clenched, his eyes darkened, and he couldn't wait any longer. He stood up abruptly, ready to walk toward Amelia. But before he could take a step, a tall, well-dressed man approached her. Gabriel froze, watching as the man greeted her. "Amelia, have you been waiting long?" The man's deep voice rang out, and Gabriel's heart sank. The man looked down at the boy and smiled warmly. "Son, have you been waiting for Daddy?" Gabriel's entire body went rigid. His chest tightened, the air in his lungs disappearing. "Daddy?" The boy had called this stranger Daddy. Had Olivia moved on? Was that why she had disappeared? Gabriel couldn't believe it. His world was slipping out of his control. He had always prided himself on being able to control everything, his business, his life. But now, standing there, he realized he had lost the one thing that truly mattered. Gabriel stood frozen, the weight of what he had just witnessed crashing down on him. The man had called the child his son. His chest tightened, making it almost impossible to breathe. The truth hit him like a ton of bricks. He had thought his relationship with Olivia was casual, a no-strings-attached arrangement. He had never promised her anything, no commitment, no future. Just two people coming together when it suited them. But seeing Olivia with another man, with a child who looked so much like him, tore that illusion apart. For the first time in his life, Gabriel felt a deep, aching pain in his heart, a pain that made him realize just how much he had taken Olivia for granted. She had loved him completely, without expectations, without asking for anything in return. She had given him her heart, and he had discarded it, thinking it didn't matter. Now, seeing her move on with another man, and watching that little boy call someone else Daddy, Gabriel understood the cost of his actions. He had spent his whole life running from love, from the very idea of family, afraid that it would trap him, just like his father had trapped his mother. He had convinced himself that love was a suffocating force, but now he saw it differently. Olivia had loved him selflessly, and he had pushed her away. Now, the truth was undeniable. Olivia had moved on. She had found someone else, someone who could be there for her and her child in ways Gabriel never had. And deep down, he knew he was the one who should have been there. He was the one who should have been the father. But he had thrown it all away. Hours later, Gabriel received the investigation report. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the file. Olivia Jordan. 29 years old. 5 years ago, she had moved to this city. She lived here now with her son, Brain Jordan, who was currently 4 years old. 5 years. That was how long she had been gone. That was how long she had been raising their son without him. Gabriel didn't need a DNA test to know the truth. He already knew. The boy was his. The reality hit him like a punch to the gut. Olivia had left him, and she had done it for a reason. She had moved to this small town to raise their son alone, away from a man who could never give her the love she deserved. The love they both needed. The love Gabriel had failed to offer. Gabriel Simeon had always considered himself a man of logic and control. Love, in his world, was a foreign concept. He had never seen the need for deep emotions or lasting relationships. So when Olivia disappeared from his life without explanation, he didn't think much of it. Maybe she was just upset, or busy with a new project, or caught up in something else. They had always had an arrangement, no strings, no commitments, just two people existing in each other's lives when it suited them. No promises, no love. So why should her sudden absence bother him? Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Gabriel tried calling her, but there was no answer. He went to her old workplace, only to find out she had resigned and left. No one knew where she had gone. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, she was really gone. There was a hole in his chest, a deep emptiness that he couldn't explain. Yet, he kept pushing it aside, focusing on his work. He threw himself into his empire, buried in deals and numbers, anything to keep from thinking about what he had lost. But no matter how many deals he closed, no matter how successful he became, the silence of his penthouse at night always brought her face back to him. 5 years passed, and Gabriel hadn't changed. He was still the same driven, cold man, consumed by his work. But no matter how much time went by, no matter how busy his days got, Amelia's face always haunted him, especially at night when he was alone. He couldn't escape the memories of her, the way she had smiled at him, the way her eyes had looked at him like she had something more to say, something he had ignored. Then one day, Gabriel found himself in a small town far from his usual world of business deals and corporate meetings. He had come to acquire a small startup for his company. After the long meeting, his assistant suggested stopping by a little cafe. Gabriel didn't care about a cafe, but he agreed out of convenience. What did it matter? The moment he stepped inside, everything stopped. There, sitting by the window, was Amelia. She looked just like she always had, the same soft, kind eyes, the same smile. But there was something else. A little boy, about 4 years old, was sitting beside her. And as Gabriel watched, something struck him. This boy looked exactly like him. His heart stopped. Olivia had been pregnant when she left. She hadn't left him just to get away. She had left to raise their child alone. A wave of regret and pain slammed into Gabriel. He had never understood her desire for a family. He had pushed her away when she had talked about having kids. And now, seeing the boy who was his son, it all came crashing down. Before Gabriel could approach her, a man entered the picture. He was tall, well-dressed, and his voice was warm and calm. He greeted Olivia and then turned to the boy. "Son, have you been waiting for Daddy?" the man asked with a smile. Gabriel's entire body froze. Daddy? The boy was calling this stranger, Daddy. A chill ran down his spine. Was Olivia with someone else? Had she moved on? Was this man the father of his son? The thought tore through him, and for the first time, Gabriel felt completely out of control. Gabriel stood frozen, unable to tear his gaze away from the scene in front of him. Amelia, the boy, and the man, the whole world around him felt like it was crumbling. The man, who had just called the boy Daddy, smiled at Olivia before walking out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The moment the door closed behind him, Gabriel felt suffocated. He was standing there, in the room where Olivia had once shared her love with him. But now, it felt like a stranger's place. His heart was tight with an emotion he couldn't name, pain, regret, anger, all tangled together. Olivia led the boy, Brain, to his room. She turned back to face Gabriel, and the weight of everything hung in the air between them. "That boy, he's my son, isn't he?" Gabriel's voice was slow, steady, but filled with a raw emotion he could hardly control. Olivia took a deep breath, her expression softening. She knew what he was asking, and she could no longer hide the truth. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice steady, yet filled with an emotion that Gabriel couldn't quite place. The weight of her words crashed over Gabriel. For 5 years, he had lived in ignorance. He had never known he had a son. His jaw clenched as he forced the words out, each one like a punch to his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amelia's eyes hardened slightly, but she didn't look away. "Do you really want to ask me that? Do you remember what you used to say to me?" Her voice was calm but firm. "You told me you didn't want kids. You were afraid of love, of commitment. If I had told you I was pregnant back then, how do you think you would have reacted?" Gabriel didn't know what to say. She was right. He had been terrified. Terrified of being trapped. Terrified of responsibility. But that didn't mean she had the right to make the decision for him. "He's still my son," Gabriel said, his voice low but firm. "You shouldn't have made that decision alone. Amelia's lips curved into a bitter smile. I didn't make the decision alone, Gabriel. I made it for both of us. I didn't want my child to grow up with a father who only stayed out of obligation. Her gaze turned to the window where Brain was playing, and her voice softened. If you had truly wanted a child, you would have realized it sooner. But you never looked for me. You never came after me. Gabriel's heart sank. How could he argue with that? She was right again. He had assumed she would just come back like she always had. He had never taken her seriously, and now he had lost 5 years. He took a deep breath, his voice quieting. Amelia. I'm sorry. Her face didn't soften at the words. She looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and understanding, but also a hint of something deeper, something he couldn't fully grasp. There's no need to apologize, she said, her voice steady, though her smile was faint and tired. I was never angry at you. I came into your life knowing what I was getting into. I knew you didn't believe in love, that you didn't want a family. She paused, her gaze drifting toward Brain again. At first, I thought if I loved you enough, maybe you'd change. But when I found out I was pregnant, I realized I couldn't keep chasing after something that was never meant to be. She sighed deeply. When I left, I stopped giving my love to you. I gave it all to our son. The silence that followed was heavy. Gabriel could feel the weight of everything he had missed, the time he had lost. It wasn't just that Olivia had stopped loving him, it was that she had learned to live without him. She had found a new purpose in her son. And Gabriel? He was left with nothing but regret. Amelia's voice broke the silence, her words firm but with a touch of hesitation. You want to meet him? Gabriel's breath caught. He could feel the tension in the room. Yes, he said softly. I need to meet him. He's my son. Amelia's face hardened slightly, her gaze unwavering. You will not hurt him, Gabriel. If you think you can just meet him and then disappear again, then don't meet him at all. Gabriel nodded firmly, his voice steady. I won't leave. Not this time. Olivia finally agreed. But only with one condition. You will not hurt him, she warned, her voice cold and her eyes sharp. If you think you can just come in and out of his life when it suits you, then don't meet him at all. Gabriel nodded, his resolve clear. He couldn't walk away from this, not again. They agreed to meet the next day. It would be the first step in making things right. Gabriel had never felt so unsure of himself in his life. He had sealed multi-million-dollar deals, faced the toughest business moguls, and negotiated with the coldest, most ruthless executives. But none of it compared to the nervous energy coursing through him now. Today, he was about to meet his son for the first time. 4 years. 4 years of missed moments, of not being there when he should have been. And now, this was his chance to finally make it right. He had no idea what to expect, what to say, or even how to act. As he stood by the park near Amelia's home, his heart raced and his thoughts were a tangled mess. Then, he saw them. Olivia walked toward him, her hand gently holding that of a small boy. The boy had soft, brown hair and eyes that struck Gabriel instantly, those eyes, identical to his own. His chest tightened, and he could feel the air leaving his lungs. Olivia stopped in front of him, crouching down to speak to the boy. Brain, this is a friend of mine, she said, her voice soft. His name is Gabriel. Gabriel stood frozen. The boy, Brain, looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. Mr. Gabriel, Brain asked, his voice hesitant. For a brief, surreal moment, Gabriel was at a loss for words. He had imagined this meeting 1,000 times in his head, but now, standing face to face with his son, everything he had planned to say vanished. Hello, Brain, Gabriel finally said, his voice quieter than usual, almost as if he was speaking to himself. Brain tilted his head, as if studying him, before asking a question that completely threw Gabriel off guard. "Do you like superheroes?" Superheroes. Gabriel had spent most of his life analyzing markets, dodging corporate bullets, and dealing with high-powered negotiations, but here he was, being asked about superheroes by his own son. Olivia let out a soft laugh, watching the rare moment of confusion pass over Gabriel's face. Gabriel glanced at Brain, then slowly nodded. "Yes, I like superheroes." Brain's eyes lit up with excitement. "Do you know who's the strongest?" he asked, his voice filled with enthusiasm. Gabriel blinked, trying to focus. I think Iron Man is pretty strong." Brain's face scrunched up in disbelief. "No way. Spider-Man is the strongest." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? Why Spider-Man?" "Because he can swing on webs, run really fast, and he's super nice, too," Brain said, beaming with joy. Gabriel watched him speak, his little eyes shining as he passionately defended his favorite hero. Something stirred in Gabriel's chest, something he couldn't quite identify. He had never imagined himself with a child. Never thought he would feel something so pure, so untainted. Yet here he was, staring at this little boy, his son. His son. The emotions that surged through Gabriel were overwhelming. He had missed so much of Brain's life. And the thought of all those lost moments hit him harder than he could have ever expected. It wasn't long before Gabriel was back in the business world, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that day in the park. The image of Brain's bright eyes, his innocent smile, and his excitement over superheroes wouldn't leave his mind. The International Economic Conference in London was in full swing. It was the kind of event Gabriel had learned to navigate without breaking a sweat. He had seen it all: competitive deals, tense negotiations, aggressive business rivals. But today, his mind wasn't on the conference. It was on Brain. He was standing in a grand hall surrounded by the world's most influential businessmen, but one name on the speaker list caught his attention. Daniel Carter. Gabriel's grip on his glass tightened as he saw the name. Daniel Carter. The man who had been there for Olivia all these years, the one who had taken care of her and Brain when Gabriel hadn't. When the panel discussion ended, Gabriel made his move. Daniel saw him too, their eyes meeting across the room. Two powerful men, both with their own stakes in the same story, connected by a woman and a child. They found a quieter lounge, the hum of conversations fading into soft jazz in the background. Gabriel didn't waste any time. He set his drink down and locked eyes with Daniel. "I want to know what's between you and Amelia," Gabriel said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a faint chuckle escaping him. "It's not what you think," he replied, his tone calm, yet carrying a hint of something deeper. He paused for a moment, his eyes distant as if remembering something long ago. "I met Olivia on a rainy night. She was pregnant with Brain and nearly collapsed from exhaustion. I took her to the hospital, and after that, I decided to help her. But Gabriel," he added, looking at Gabriel with an almost sad understanding, "I didn't stay with her to take her away from you. I always knew her heart never belonged to me." Gabriel's breath caught in his chest. He had always known Olivia loved him, but to hear it from someone else, someone who had been there, who had tried and failed to win her heart, it hit him in a way he hadn't expected. "You're the one she loves, Gabriel," Daniel continued, his voice quiet, almost regretful. "Sadly, you never realized how much." Gabriel's fists clenched beneath the table. He had always been so focused on himself, on his career, on his own ambitions. He had never realized how much he had hurt Amelia, how much he had taken her love for granted. Daniel continued, his expression sharpening with intensity. "I adopted Brain, but I never tried to replace you. I was just there to protect Olivia and your son. But if you truly love her, if you truly want your family back," he leaned forward, his voice turning into a quiet challenge, "then don't hurt her again, Gabriel." Gabriel sat there, unable to respond immediately. For the first time, he truly understood. He had lost her once. And now, he wasn't going to lose her again. Later that evening, after the conference, Gabriel drove straight to Amelia's house. The night was quiet, the windows of her home glowing softly in the dark. He had never felt like he belonged there before, but now he wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to find his place in this new life he had nearly thrown away. He took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. When Olivia opened the door, she seemed surprised, but quickly composed herself. The same face, the same eyes, but now, there was something different in her gaze. Something guarded, something he had never seen before. "Gabriel," she said, her voice full of disbelief, but also a kind of resignation. He stood there for a long moment, not knowing where to begin. Then, with a steady, almost urgent voice, he said, "I want a chance." Olivia frowned, confused. "A chance for what?" "A chance to love you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "And a chance to be a father again." Amelia's heart trembled, and for a split second, she wanted to believe him. But she couldn't. Not so easily. "Gabriel," she said, her voice calm but heavy with emotion. "I was never angry at you. When I left, I knew there was no future for us. I didn't hate you. I left because I needed to love our son enough for the both of us." Her words hit Gabriel like a punch. He had everything, money, power, success, but he had lost the two most important people in his life. And now, standing here, he realized just how small he truly was. "I was wrong," he said, his voice low but full of regret. "I was a fool to let you go. But Amelia, I can't change the past. I can only do everything I can to make things right now." He stepped closer to her, his gaze unwavering. "Give me a chance, not because you feel obligated, not because you think you have to, but because I truly want to learn how to love you. How to be a father. How to be a better man." Olivia stood there, her eyes locked on his, as the emotions swirled between them. She didn't know what to believe anymore, but deep inside, she knew she wasn't the same woman who had once loved Gabriel. And yet, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them after all. Gabriel had never been the kind of man to admit his faults. He wasn't one for apologies, and certainly not for asking for a second chance. But there he was, standing before Amelia, with sincerity in his eyes, saying things he'd never said before. The man who once feared responsibility, who ran away from love, was now willing to fight for it. Olivia didn't speak. She didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. From that day forward, everything changed. Gabriel wasn't just the distant figure he used to be. No longer was he only a shadow in Brain's life. He began to show up. He started spending time with Brain, taking him to places like the zoo and amusement parks, things Gabriel had never imagined himself doing. It wasn't easy at first. Brain didn't immediately accept him as a father, but Gabriel didn't push. He just kept showing up, patiently building their bond, one small moment at a time. And slowly, Brain began to trust him. Olivia couldn't deny what was happening. She watched Gabriel day by day, and she saw the change. He wasn't the cold, distant man she had known 5 years ago. He didn't make promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Instead, he showed up, steadily, quietly, without asking for anything in return. He was making up for the lost years, not with grand gestures or flowery words, but with small acts of love that spoke volumes. It was the little things. One morning, Amelia's phone buzzed with a message. A colleague had texted her a screenshot of Gabriel's Instagram. She was confused at first but then froze when she saw it. Gabriel had changed his profile picture, a candid shot from a picnic they had with Brain. And there was another post. A picture of her, laughing, her eyes sparkling, with the caption, "The most important things to me." Amelia's heart pounded. Gabriel, the man who had once shied away from relationships, had made her and Brain the center of his world. His office, once filled with contracts and paperwork, now had a framed family photo of the three of them. Even his living room had one. She could no longer deny it, Gabriel had changed. One afternoon, Gabriel took her to the Simeon Group headquarters. Olivia felt uneasy as they walked into the building, but Gabriel held her hand tightly, as if reassuring her. When they entered the conference room, with dozens of senior executives gathered, Gabriel stepped forward and, with complete confidence, introduced her to the room. "This is Olivia Jordan, my woman." The room fell silent for a moment, stunned. Everyone knew Gabriel Simeon didn't do public displays of affection. The media buzzed with excitement, calling him the Ice King, who had finally fallen in love. Olivia turned to him in shock. "Gabriel, what are you doing?" He shrugged, unfazed. "I just wanted everyone to know that you're the most important person to me." His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. Every day, Amelia's phone buzzed with small, thoughtful texts. "Did you eat today? Are you tired? What do you want for dinner? I'll cook for you." And every evening, she came home to find a bouquet of flowers waiting for her. Sometimes they were roses, sometimes daisies, her favorite. One day, she asked him, "Why do you keep buying me flowers?" His answer was simple. "Because I want you to always have something to smile about." It wasn't just flowers. Gabriel started learning how to cook. His skills were a work in progress, but every time he stepped into the kitchen, Olivia couldn't help but feel the warmth between them. They cooked together. They cleaned together. And once, when she teased him about washing dishes, he simply shrugged with a gentle smile and said, "If it makes you happy, I'll do it every day." Then one evening, something happened that took them all by surprise. As they walked through the park, Brain reached out and grabbed Gabriel's hand. Gabriel froze, staring down at the little fingers wrapped around his own. Then, in the quietest of voices, Brain spoke the word Gabriel had never expected to hear. "Dad." The world seemed to stop. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Brain had never called him that before. But now, it seemed as though the word had been waiting to be spoken all along. Gabriel felt a warmth spread through his chest, stronger than any success or wealth he'd ever known. For the first time in his life, he understood what family truly meant. He squeezed Brain's tiny hand, his voice shaking slightly. "Yeah, Dad's here." Olivia stood frozen, watching them. Her heart was filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Maybe Gabriel really had changed. Maybe there was a future for them, a chance for a family. One evening, after putting Brain to bed, Olivia stepped out onto the balcony. She gazed at the starry sky, lost in thought. Gabriel was already there, standing in silence. When he saw her, he turned toward her, his eyes distant, as if lost in the past. She walked toward him slowly, wondering what he was thinking. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He met her gaze, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "The past. The things I missed." He paused, and a small laugh escaped him, one tinged with regret. "I used to think I could live my whole life without love, but I was wrong." Olivia listened, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "I can't change the years I lost," Gabriel continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But Amelia, I want to walk with you from now on. Not because I feel obligated, but because I truly want to." Her heart trembled. For years, she had lived without him. But now, seeing him try, truly try, to be part of their family, she couldn't deny it anymore. Her heart had never stopped loving him. Taking a deep breath, she smiled softly. "Gabriel, I never closed the door on you." A spark of hope lit in his eyes. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Then this time, I won't let go." Olivia met his gaze, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no fear. She simply believed. And just like that, after all those years of being lost, two hearts that had once drifted apart finally found their way back to the same rhythm. That night, rain tapped softly against the windows, but inside the house, the air was thick with worry. Brain had a high fever. Despite Amelia's best efforts, his temperature refused to drop. He lay there, weak, his little body burning with fever, his breath shallow and quick. Gabriel had never felt so helpless. A man who prided himself on being in control, who thrived on solving problems, now found himself lost, unable to do anything but watch his son struggle. He wished he could take the fever from him, bear the pain himself, but all he could do was hold Brain's small hand, his mind racing with fear and helplessness. What did the doctor say? His voice was hoarse with worry. Olivia answered, her voice tight with fear. We have to keep monitoring him. If the fever doesn't break, we'll need to take him to the hospital. Gabriel nodded, but he couldn't sit still. He moved around the house, changing the cool compresses, checking Brain's temperature, calling in a doctor in the middle of the night. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. All night, he sat by Brain's side, holding his tiny hand, his heart aching every time Brain whimpered or stirred in discomfort. Olivia watched him, her heart heavy with the sight of the man she had once thought could never be a father, now giving everything he had to care for their son. She had once believed Gabriel would never truly step into the role of a father, but now, watching him so lost in worry for Brain, she saw a different man. A man who had changed. A man who was finally stepping up. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The love in Gabriel's actions spoke louder than words ever could. And as the night wore on, as the fever finally began to break, Gabriel didn't move. He stayed there, by his son's side, unwilling to let go, knowing that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. After a long and restless night of worry, Brain's fever finally broke by morning. The little boy's breath had steadied, and his body no longer burned with the fever that had kept them both up all night. Olivia let out a sigh of relief as she looked at her son, but her gaze soon shifted to Gabriel. He was still there, sitting beside the bed, holding Brain's tiny hand in his eyes barely open, afraid that if he let go even for a moment, his son might slip away again. At that moment, Olivia knew. The man sitting next to her wasn't the same Gabriel she had known 5 years ago, the one who had run from responsibility and avoided love. This was a man who cared deeply, a man who had changed. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Gabriel's eyes fluttered open and met hers. He looked at her for a long time, his voice steady, but thick with emotion. I love you, Amelia, and I love our son. Olivia stood still, her heart racing. She could hardly believe the words she had just heard. It was the first time he had said them. Not out of obligation or fear of losing her, but because he truly meant them. Her heart trembled, and silent tears slipped down her cheeks. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. 2 weeks passed, and the changes in Gabriel were undeniable. He wasn't just a distant figure anymore. He spent more time with Brain, getting to know him, easing into the boy's life slowly. At first, Brain was hesitant. He didn't see Gabriel as his father right away, but Gabriel didn't rush him. He listened intently to every Spider-Man story Brain told him. He learned how to play with him, took him to the zoo, and to amusement parks, things Gabriel never thought he would do. Slowly, Brain began to accept him, and so did Amelia. She could see the change in Gabriel. He wasn't the same man who had once been so distant and cold. He made no promises or grand declarations. He just quietly stayed, showing his love through small actions. Gabriel had never been one for words, but Olivia began to realize that his love was shown in the little things he did. One morning, her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. She opened Instagram, and there it was, Gabriel had changed his profile picture. It was a candid shot of the three of them, Gabriel, Amelia, and Brain, laughing at a park. His caption was simple but powerful: "The most important things to me." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Gabriel, the man who had once avoided any public acknowledgement of a relationship, had now put her and Brain at the center of his world. Not only had he changed his profile picture, but there was also a framed family photo of them smiling at the park, sitting on his office desk. Another frame sat in his living room. Gabriel had never been the type to express his feelings outwardly, but now, Olivia couldn't ignore the deep love he had for them. One afternoon, Gabriel took her to the Simeon Group headquarters. She felt uneasy as they entered the building, but Gabriel simply smiled and held her hand tighter. When they stepped into the conference room in front of hundreds of senior executives, Gabriel's voice rang out with unwavering confidence. "This is Olivia Jordan, my woman." The room fell silent for a moment before whispers began to spread. Gabriel Simeon, the powerful and stoic businessman, had just introduced Olivia to the entire company. The media exploded with excitement: "The Ice King has fallen in love." Olivia was in shock. "Gabriel, what are you doing?" He shrugged, completely unfazed. "I just wanted everyone to know you're the most important person to me." It wasn't just the big gestures. Gabriel sent her small, thoughtful messages every day. "Did you eat today? Are you tired? What do you want for dinner? I'll cook." And every evening, when Olivia returned home, there was always a bouquet of flowers waiting for her: roses, baby's breath, sometimes small daisies, the ones she loved the most. One day, she finally asked, "Why do you keep buying me flowers?" Gabriel's answer was simple, but it hit her right in the heart. "Because I want you to always have something to smile about." Not only did he buy her flowers, but Gabriel had also started learning to cook. He wasn't great at it, but every time he stepped into the kitchen, the warmth of his love filled the air. They cooked together, washed dishes together. Once, when she teased him about Gabriel Simeon washing dishes, he simply shrugged and smiled at her with gentle eyes. "If it makes you happy, I'll do it every day." One evening, as the three of them walked through the park, Brain reached out and took Gabriel's hand. Gabriel froze. His gaze dropped to the small fingers wrapped around his own, and before he could process what was happening, a small voice said, "Dad." Olivia froze too, her heart pounding in her chest. Brain had never called Gabriel Dad before, but today, it seemed to slip out so naturally, as if it had been waiting to be spoken all along. Gabriel's heart swelled. He couldn't describe the feeling, but it was the warmth, the love, the sense of family he had never known. "Yeah, Dad's here," he said softly, his voice a little unsteady. Olivia stood frozen, watching them. Her heart trembled. Maybe Gabriel had really changed. Maybe, just maybe, she could give him a chance. One evening, after Brain had fallen asleep, Olivia stepped out onto the balcony. She looked up at the starry sky, her thoughts swirling. Gabriel was already there, standing silently. His eyes seemed distant, as if lost in thought. She walked toward him slowly, standing beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Gabriel turned to look at her. "The past. The things I missed." He paused for a moment, then let out a quiet, self-deprecating laugh. "I used to think I could live my whole life without love, but I was wrong." Olivia listened in silence. Gabriel took a deep breath, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I can't change the years I lost," he said. "But Amelia, I want to walk with you from now on. Not because I feel obligated, but because I truly want to." She could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Her heart trembled. For years, she had learned to live without Gabriel. But now, seeing him truly try to be a part of their family, she couldn't deny it, her heart had never stopped loving him. She smiled softly, her voice full of emotion. "Gabriel, I never closed the door on you. A spark lit in Gabriel's eyes, and slowly, he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Then this time, I won't let go. Olivia met his gaze, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no fear. She simply believed. And just like that, after years of being lost, two hearts that had once drifted apart finally found their way back to the same rhythm. 1 month later, their wedding day arrived. The ceremony was held at a beautiful seaside resort, where the golden sunset painted the ocean in shades of amber and gold. The entire venue was bathed in a warm, romantic glow. Gabriel had planned everything, sparing no expense, for the woman he loved. The media went wild. The Ice King has finally fallen in love. Over 1,000 guests attended, powerful figures from finance, politics, and entertainment, but Gabriel didn't care about any of them. His eyes were only on Olivia as she stepped into view in a stunning white gown. The entire venue fell silent, and Gabriel stood at the altar, unable to look away. His heart raced as she walked toward him, every step bringing her closer. When she finally reached him, and he took her hand, he knew. He had everything. The ceremony was surrounded by flowers, candlelight, and the soft whisper of ocean waves. When it was time for their vows, Gabriel held her hands tightly, his deep voice filled with emotion. Amelia, I once believed I could live my whole life without love. But then you came along and shattered everything I thought I knew. You showed me that love is not control, that family is not a cage, and that happiness is not something to be feared. I once had the chance to be happy, but I didn't cherish it. Thank you for teaching me how to love. From this day forward, and for the rest of my life, I vow to always stand by you and our son, to protect you, to cherish you, and to love you with everything I have. Amelia's voice trembled as she spoke. I never needed a promise. I only needed you. A husband, a father, and now I know I've found him. They exchanged rings, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel pulled Olivia into a deep, passionate kiss. The crowd erupted in cheers, and from across the room, Brain's laughter filled the air as he played with the other children. Gabriel glanced at his son and then back at Amelia. He squeezed her hand gently. I finally found what I spent my whole life running from. Olivia smiled, tilting her head. And what's that? Gabriel looked toward Brain, then back at her, his eyes filled with love. A real family. Under the golden sunset, surrounded by the gentle melody of the ocean and the flutter of flower petals in the wind, Olivia leaned into the man she loved. She knew, without a doubt, that from this moment on, she would never walk alone again. They had found each other, and this was their forever. Thank you so much for watching and following this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to know how it made you feel. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10. What did you think? If you want more heartwarming stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. Let's continue sharing love, warmth, and meaningful moments together. Until next time.